afternoon and greetings from the great state of North Carolina. My name is Bishop Carswell Leonard, and I serve as a senior pastor of the Station Community Church located in the city of Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm excited and grateful that Sister Creasy has asked me to participate in this Comeback Stronger project. We're offering motivational moments to leaders, and I've been asked to deal with this subject, rethinking our practices. As you know, many of us over the years have developed what we call best practices. This way of doing things have been very productive for us, yield great results, and we're accustomed of doing things in a certain way. But as you know, we are in challenging times. We operate ministry in a different environment. In the next few weeks, we're going to be released to go back to our physical buildings and conduct worship services. But it will be different. The environment will be different. The restrictions will be different. And so we need to, even before that time comes, begin to think about how are we going to do things? What are going to be our new best practices? I want to talk about 3 S's first that I think are extremely important as we consider what we're going to do. The first S is space. Social distancing is going to be critical even as we return to our physical buildings. Even now, we need to be thinking about how are we going to maintain the right social distancing to keep everyone safe. The second S is safety. You and I as leaders are responsible for the safety of everyone that enters into our building for worship. That primarily includes those who are the most vulnerable, and that includes our elderly, those with pre-existing conditions, and as we know, minority communities are being more negatively affected by this COVID virus than the general population. So those of us who pastor congregations of color need to keep this in mind. And then the third S is sanitize. We need to be very cognizant that we're going to have to keep our sanctuary clean and sanitize even more often than we've been doing. I want to sort of frame our discussion, and it's a very short video, so I don't have much time. Frame our discussion around 2 broad categories, assimilation and worship. As we know, assimilation really begins from the time a person enters into our grounds, our parking lot, and really doesn't end until they leave. So there's certain areas as it relates to assimilation that we really need to take thought of even now before we are released to return into our buildings. The first one, it has to do with our ushers and greeters. We know that they are going to have to maintain social distancing even after we return. And so the handshaking, the embrace is not going to be common practice anymore. So we need to be very creative. How do we feel? How do we make people feel comfortable inviting even without the interpersonal close relationship? Well, one of the things that we can do, and some of us have been doing this for some time, sort of the post-service telephone calls, thanking them for coming, inviting them back again, or even a short video from the pastor or the pastoral staff can be very effective in reaching and touching them, even though we can't touch them physically. If you conduct a new members class or a new members class, I would recommend that we think now about doing those under a virtual platform. There is Zoom, there's GoToMeeting, there's Google Meets. There's several platforms that you can use that you can still accomplish those very vital functions and still maintain social distancing. I know that those are not large groups for the most part, but if we can reduce and minimize the amount of people that come together, we're going to be in better shape. And some churches have maybe a coffee station or a pastry station for fellowship before church. We can still do those kind of things, but what I would recommend is we use prepackaged products, prepackaged pastry, prepackaged condiments such as the sugar and the cream. Those all be prepackaged so no one has to touch a container, and that reduces the spread of the virus. Quickly move into just the whole issue of worship. I think it's very important now that we think critically about how are we going to maintain the sanctuary clean. And so I recommend that there be a post cleaning and a pre-cleaning and a post-cleaning. Cleaning before the worship service and a cleaning after the worship service. So we need to make sure that our cleaning people are abreast of this, and that there's a strategy for how we're going to do this, especially if we have multiple services. I also think that we need to think about having face coverings available. It may be that it will be required for our gatherings that people wear masks of some sort, and so if we can order those now and have those on hand, I think it'll facilitate the process. We need to reevaluate our worship space. Because of the social distancing guidelines, we may have to look at our space, our seating capacity, and determine how we're going to seat people so that they're right distance apart to maintain the social distancing. So I suggest you do that right now. Go into your sanctuary, just evaluate your space, your seating capacity, and based on how many you can have in the sanctuary at one time, then you can develop your plan. It may be that you may have to do multiple services because of the size of your building, and so you need to think about that now. That's very resource intensive. Praise team, musicians, preachers. So think about that now when you determine the plan if you have to go to multiple services. Very importantly, you must develop an entrance and exit strategy. So that is, how do we control the amount of people that come into the building at one time? They can't be gathered together, so you have to develop some strategy, a few in at a time, or spaced apart as they enter, and then exiting. We like to gather together after church and fellowship. That's not possible. So determine a strategy, work with the ushers on how you can get people out of the building, maintaining social distancing. And then lastly, offerings, a vital part of our service, of our worship, but we must think ahead and see how we're going to handle that. Now, passing the plate, as we call it, may or may not be the best way to do that. I'm thinking about establishing giving stations throughout the campus where people can give in the receptacles when nobody's around. That can be done before, during, or after the service. Or if you still want to bring the offering, then the usher's going to have to maintain social distancing, and they can put it in the receptacle up front. There doesn't have to be an usher or a deacon there. They can put it in the receptacle, and then we can get it after. So it's a short video, but these were some ideas that I'm thinking about as a pastor that may help us. So as you plan to return to your sanctuaries, as the restrictions are lifted, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for all of us that this transition will be smooth, that we will reconsider that our best practices are no longer best practices. We need to rethink our practices, and I know that God is going to bless us. I believe God is going to give us great ministries as we go back into our worship spaces, as we reform to worship. Just keep all this in mind, and I'm praying that God will bless you. Thank you so much, and have a great day.